Let's create this sci-fi looking column. Now it may look complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. And it's all made from this one cube. So first things first, how did I do this cube? For this cube I modeled it in Blender and I used Boxcutter. And this is a really simple process in here with these tools, because you can do it in like 5-6 minutes. Here is a time lapse of how I did it. It took me something less than 6 minutes and I was even trying hard. Of course you can spend some more time on it, but you know, just a couple of minutes for this kind of geometry is what you need. So this is how I did it, and it's really simple and it's a lot of fun. I love using this tool. It's really creative and you can create great geometry in just a matter of seconds. It's such a great and powerful tool. And we will create this base geometry that we can then use to create more complicated shapes in Houdini. So I'll let you watch for a bit and we'll continue in Houdini. Now back to Houdini. And I'm gonna explain you the process in one simple example, and then I'm gonna explain you how I created the column, because it's just using this process all over again, just doing some variations and doing basically this thing all over again. So here we have our model that we modeled in Blender with the help of Boxcutter. Now you can rotate it or scale it or do whatever with it what you need. So that's what this transform is doing. Then I want to just align it so it sits on the 0 on the x-axis, and this is just for organization's sake. So it did basically just almost nothing. And now in here I'm gonna use my slice tool to just cut the geometry. So when it deforms, we'll get a very nice and smooth surface. And I'm just duplicating this geometry, and so that it duplicates like the perfect size. Notice if I would cancel this, I would have to put in the distance myself. So this is what this expression is doing, and it's just reading the bounding box size from this node in the x-axis. So very simple but handy expression. And as you can see, like the box is 2 meters in size, so that's why it's 2. If I would make it larger, you can see now the number has increased, and as you can see, we are getting perfect repetitions, so it's very handy. Now, and once you have this chain of your geometry, you can just offset it and then bend it. So if I wouldn't have it offset, I would have a smaller circle. So this helps me to create larger shapes. You can also rotate it, so you get this kind of effect, or scale it and be creative with your shapes. So this is actually really fun. You want to have larger rings, you can just add them, and the final stage I'm just aligning it to the center. so it's all nice and organized. Here's how you can set up the bend tool. So just type in bend and you'll see something like this. Now once you enter the handle tool, you'll see something like this, and this is very difficult to control. So what you want to do is just right click on it and toggle this option, or just press G and you'll get this thing, and this will help you a lot. Now you can just control rotate it and get these handles. So now you can set up your capture region and bend the geometry, but I want to rotate it in this way and actually rotate it in 360 degrees. Oops, 360. But notice now, if I would change the number of segments, you see it doesn't compensate for the capture geometry. The capture volume doesn't compensate for this new geometry. So to make it automatic, we're just going to use, I'm just going to copy this expression, and what it is, it just basically gets the size, the length of this object in the x-axis. As you can see, building box from the out of blocks, which is this object, and get the dimension x size. So then we can put this in the capture length. This is what we need to modify, and I'm just going to put it in here. And as you can see now we'll get perfect round circles. And that's it. This is how you set up your bend node. And let me just quickly show you what would happen if you wouldn't subdivide or slice the geometry. As you can see, you get this very low polygon looking geometry. Now if you don't have this tool, you can also use the divide nodes and uncheck all of this stuff and use this breaker options, and you can just play around with this until you get something. So that can be helpful for you. And that's basically it. That's what I did for the big column, and I'm just going to show you it in more detail. Now all you need to do is basically do the same thing all over again and do some modification and play around with the shapes. So as you can see, I started with the same box, sliced it and did the same thing in here, something different in here. Now as you can see, there are some gaps in here, and that is because I'm taking in a copy transform node, I'm taking the distance from this size node, which is here, and I scaled it afterwards. So that's why it's keeping the distance. And I also, as you can see, I clipped the one side because I knew I'm not gonna see it, so I wanted to save some polygons here. So, and this is the bottom part. It's just merging together different kind of rings, and this is what you get. And I also merged in this kind of tube, so that looked interesting. and this is how I get the bottom part of the column, and then I packed it so we get more performance, and this way now you can manipulate each individual vertices or primitives, but we don't need to at this point, and it's much faster, and it works much faster in the viewport, and everything, all the operations just work faster. And I mirrored it on the y-axis, so I have the same on the bottom and the top, and I scaled it a little bit in position. So this is for the base and the top part. Now for this main part of the column, again I started with a ring of geometry, and I packed it for performance, and then I duplicated it in this kind of straight column, and you can position it. And I used this node, which is basically bend, but I think you can, if you just type in taper, you can use this too, and you can now taper the geometry. Just modify the region, so we can now play with the shape, and that is exactly what I did. So I can modify it and play around. So what I did was actually this. These are my settings that worked for me. So as you can see, I'm just tapering the shape to make it more interesting. I merge it all together, just doing some axis align so it sits on the ground, and then you can just use this node to bake it into a alembic geometry, to use it in your favorite 3D software, or just have it saved somewhere on the disk. And yeah, basically you're done. You can just play around, create different variations, and here's the cool thing. If I change the input, this is my original input, this is another version of the cube. So if I change the input, the whole geometry changes. As you can see, so you can create some variations in there if you want to. Now notice, if after the copying and the packing, we have only 32 points, 32 primitives, and that is because we packed the geometry before we copied it. If I wouldn't do it, now you can see suddenly we have 3.5 million primitives, 4.3 million points, and now it's going to be much harder to do the deformation. Now there will be a noticeable lag, as you can see, because now it has to deform each point individually, whereas if I pack it before, it only has to handle 32 points. This is why now it's much smoother, much faster. So depending on what you need, sometimes yes, sometimes you might want to deform each point individually, but in this case it was worth doing it so I get a much faster performance. Alright, that's all. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next one.